Welcome back as we continue our Earth Day. It's difficult to call it celebrations, commemorations, passions, drives. Our focus on our beautiful blue planets, and the blue being, of course, water, and that's our focus right now. Now, we have been keeping you up to date on all of the latest happenings in the world, and while doing so, we got to learn more about this particular process too. Now, recently news broke about Japan's plans to dump over 1 million tons of nuclear waste water from the Fukushima nuclear disaster into the ocean. This is obviously, to us, quite alarming.
A bit of anger coming up as you even mentioned that, G. Now, this morning, we're chatting with Maryke Musson. She's the CEO of the Two Oceans Aquarium Education Foundation, and she's here to discuss the Fukushima nuclear disaster, as well as what the actual ramifications might be from the plans to release this water into the oceans.
Maryke, you've raised your eyebrows a couple of times in that discussion. First of all, can I say how nice it is to have you here in person?
It's so nice to be
so
here,
good to see
and
you.
especially on Earth Day,
Yeah.
which is sort of Earth Day / Ocean Day.
I was going to say,
covers
kind of the ocean is the Earth, so we need, that's why I say, like the blue planet, because that's really at the heart of so much conservation at the moment and needs to be. I mean, we could talk to you for hours about so many different things, but we're going to focus on Fukushima, and maybe a good place to start is if you can take us back to the 11th of March 2011 and that devastating earthquake that led to the disaster. What actually happened on that day?
Yeah, it was definitely seen as one of the biggest natural disasters in history. And sort of mid-afternoon, there was this enormous earthquake, and it was sort of in about 130 kilometers offshore in the northeastern side of Japan. And Japan, of course, is this incredible island. And an earthquake is when sort of the tectonic plates shift a little bit, and this causes like a massive vibration and this ripple effect to shore. So firstly, everything was shaking like crazy, and buildings started collapsing, and it was at a magnitude of 9, which is really high. But at the same time, because it was 30 kilometers under sea level, it created this tsunami. Now, in our heads, like, you think it's this massive big wave, and the big wave surfers are going to go mad on it, but actually it's the water just, this ripple causes the water to really move fast, and as it gets shallower to land, it's this wall of water, and it just pushes everything out of its way, and sea level rises. So, for instance, where the Daiichi power plant, nuclear power plant was, the sea level rose with 14 meters. I mean, that, if you just think the height,
that's our studio done, yeah.
So this is obviously built with that in mind, because Japan is exposed to a lot of earthquakes, and it was spec'd to be safe up to about 5.5 meter rise. So the biggest problem on that day, besides buildings collapsing and this massive water surge, I mean, 20,000 people died in this incident, and most of them drowned, and most of them were old people, like over the age of 65, which is really sad. But the structural damage to this part of Japan was, it was about $200 billion worth of damage. So it was a massive disaster. Then, of course, if we now head over to the nuclear power plant, what happened there is structurally it was okay-ish, but because of the water level rise, it flooded all the electrical works. And these plants shut down automatically when there are earthquakes or any risk. And then it needs to still cool down, because it works at really high temperature. It works with steam turbines. So it sucks in seawater, heats it up with radioactive energy, and then you've got to cool this whole system again. So the electricity shut down because it flooded and it couldn't cool down. So it started melting, and that caused holes to burn into these containment tanks, and then radioactive water flew back into the ocean, but also into the soil. So it was land-based as well. And Japan reacted immediately and called for an evacuation, like 20 to 30 kilometer radius, where people just had to fled. And I went to Fukushima, and it was incredible, actually. And they had to try and sort of rebuild this place. And in Iwaki, which is a big town, and it's about 40 kilometers from the nuclear plant, they've got this amazing, it's probably one of the best aquariums in the world. And they had a little bit of warning. So they said to the staff, those who want to fled, go. And 70% of the staff decided, we're going to stay because we're going to look after the animals.
Yeah.
And they saved like all the marine mammals, the big, like the sea lions and things. But a lot of the tanks washed away and the fish washed away. All the cars in the car park washed away. And then they had to prioritize what are the essential services. They've got to rebuild community walls, rebuild hospitals. And the aquarium was obviously last on the list. And then the community said, we need this aquarium put back
Part
together.
of our DNA,
because we want to have this lovely space where we can, enjoy ourselves. So they rebuilt it in 3 months.
Wow.
Time. But they put really good monitoring programs in place. So Japan at the time voluntarily stopped fishing and said, just in case our marine life absorb all this nuclear energy.
Speaking of that, I mean, the irony of an aquarium being in danger because of the ocean is quite crazy in itself. But what is the danger related to should we be worried about now releasing this radioactive water into the ocean?
Yeah, so just if we think back to the time and the release of these, it's radioactive, basically little isotopes. And they're quite unstable little atoms. And the level that was introduced in the ocean, it rise, but it was never higher than sort of the worldwide standard. But Japan dropped their sort of maximum level and monitored it. And the fish was actually, they picked up some radioactive contamination, but it was actually really low in the big scheme of things. And then by 2018, they said, now we can start the fisheries again and you can eat it again. So this water that they want to discharge it's been purified. And it's a lot, like you mentioned, it's like over a million cubes.
Tons, yeah.
But they want to do it over 20 to 30 years. So when you decommission a nuclear power station, it takes up to 40 years. So most of the water has been purified. They want to discharge it back into the ocean, and they measure the radioactivity, and the unit that they measured it in is like microsieverts, and it's going to be like 0.8 microsieverts. And if you go for an X-ray, you're exposed to like, I think like 2
so we are safe.
So I'm not a nuclear scientist, disclaimer, but it's really well managed. My biggest problem with this, especially on this kind of a day like today, is the discharge of anything into the ocean shouldn't be allowed. Whether the risk is being mitigated or not. So don't discharge stuff into the ocean, just love the ocean.
I like the fact that regardless of the danger involved, we are talking about it and people are reacting, which is exactly what we need on Earth Day. Let's see if we can pick up any more Earth Day facts coming up in our news.